للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله سيد ولد آدم أجمعين صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين على مر الأيام والليالي والشهور والسنين أما بعد. We continue on the date, which is February the 27th, right everyone? February the 27th, 2019, this night of Wednesday, according to the non-Muslims, of course, is Wednesday, which agrees with in the Hijri calendar, which is the 22nd night. And we're still in the month of Jumad al-Akhirah, on this blessed night, inshallah, which technically on the Hijri calendar is considered the night of Thursday, on the Hijri calendar. In the year of 1440 after the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu salam. We finished the ahkam in regards to visiting the graves with the conditions of what is the reasons for why one will visit the grave. And we said that this matter of the grave, you'll find that we discussed, and we'll return back to Kitaab At-Tawheed, that the only reason why one visits the grave is in order to take a mu'idah, an exhortation or remembrance for the hereafter, a reminder of the hereafter. And remember, everyone's final abode and his ultimate destiny will be under that dirt. And that is the reason for why visiting graves have been legislated, for these reasons only. Like we said, to give salams to the Muslimin, make dua for them, of those who have passed away, and to also take reminder of death. So it can moisten one's heart, or loosen and bring gentleness to one's heart, and let his eyes weep, and allow it to be an incentive for one to be prepared for the hereafter by taking advantage of his time and what will benefit him of increasing himself in knowledge and application of it. And all of that is preparation for the hereafter and the life of the grave. Is seeking beneficial knowledge. Seeking beneficial knowledge. And likewise trying to rectify oneself by cleansing his soul of all those different types of pollutants, whether it be pollutants of shirk, or pollutants of bid'ah, or pollutants of disobedience. And all of that is the confirmation of the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. On the day in which one's wealth and his money will not benefit him except the one who comes to Allah with a sound heart. And we said that the meaning of sound heart is just likewise with the great Imam, Shaykhul Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, mentioned that the meaning of sound heart is a heart that's khali min al-shirkiyat, or al-qalb al-khadim, or al-qalb al-salim, or al-qalb al-khali min al-shirkiyat, wal-bid'iyat, or i'tiqadat fasida, وما يتبع ذلك يعني ما يتفرع عن ذلك من المعاصي. For verily a sound heart is a heart that is empty of polytheism. He said the heart that's empty of polytheism and innovation and all those different corruptive beliefs and corruptive ideologies, and also likewise what follows that of sins. So that is what's going to benefit a person when he meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what we all prepare for in this life and in this journey that we are in right now, in which a lot of our lives have now been have been cut, in which you'll find that a lot of us who have reached the 30s and the 40s, meaning that we have cut half of our lives already, because the life expectancy, which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, is said, أعمار أمتي ما بين 60 إلى 70 وأقلهم من يجوز ذلك. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the age limit or the expectancy or the longevity of my ummah, in most cases, not all cases, some people go beyond that, but in most cases he said that the age of my ummah will be from 60 to 70. So me being 41, the life expectancy of me arriving at 60 or 70 is not that far away. So the life of the grave is close. So life expectancy, which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, is from the 60 to 70. He says, and a small amount of them from my ummah will go past that. A small amount of them will what? Surpass that. So the life of the grave is close. And when a person is in his 40s, he starts to look, if Allah has given him tawfiq, he starts to look at life differently. Especially when you reach 38 to 40, 41, 42. And that's when usually two things happen. Either you start to increase in closeness to Allah, or you start to regress because you start to go through midlife crisis that some people go through. Start losing their mind. Start to go now through midlife crisis. But now, that age is the late age limit where you have attained you've reached your peak, where your aql, your mind should be what? Complete. And you should start looking at life in a more different perspective and in a different way in preparation for death. For that reason, ya ma'ashal ikhwa, as we discuss the hukum of what we were discussing from last class in regards to the women visiting the graves, we said ultimately that it is permissible, however, with conditions. As we said, if a person wants to let his wife, or let's just say his mother or his daughter, visit the grave, it will have to be with certain prerequisites. It will have to be shurut. From them is that they have to be those people who are sahib al-aqidah al-qawiyya, a person that is strong in their belief, very strong in their conviction, in their belief, where the aqidah, al-aqidah al-salafiyya, al-sunniyya, that prophetic, correct, sound belief system of Ahlul Sunnah has been deep rooted in our heart, where she will not let her emotions get the best of her. Whereas she goes to the grave, like we said, and one does not have the fear that she will fall into a mahdhur, that she will fall into something prohibited. Either a polytheism, or belief in some superstition, or belief in some omen, or belief in some type of myth. Or, for example, she utilizes the dead to draw close to Allah, as what a lot of Sufis do these days, and a lot of Rawafid. You'll find that they utilize the dead to draw close to Allah. So they don't make dua. The living doesn't make dua for the dead. Rather, they think the dead is benefiting them, and they're alive. That's shirk. That is the polytheism that we're warning about right now. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered their supplication based upon that the dead is right next to him. That they have some virtue, and as a result of them supplicating to Allah by their grave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer their supplication. This is what has been prohibited. So if we said that the woman has this type of belief, you fear she's going to fall into it, then by all means prohibit her. By all means. Like we said, the chapter which we'll return to, which we've been discussing, these chapters are discussing how the Messenger of Allah described those who opened the door of polytheism up to be shiral al-khalq. شرار الخلق عند الله الذين فتحوا باب الشرك فما بال لو أنهم وقعوا فيه الذين هم يعتبرون شرار الخلق فتحوا باب الشرك فما بالهم لو كانوا قد عبدوا غير الله تبارك وتعالى. So that we said, and we'll discuss this. If you notice in the chapter, we've been saying how the Messenger of Allah described the most evil of creation, being those who opened up the door to polytheism. How much more would it be if the people who actually worship other than Allah would be? What would be their level? It says in the chapter, the Prophet ﷺ described them as being the most evil of creation. Those who opened up the door to polytheism. How much more would it be if they actually worship other than Allah? Even though they described for being the most evil of creation, the one who opened up the door. What do you think the magnitude of their sin would be? Those who actually worship other than Allah. So we said that this is the prerequisites and the conditions that have to be stipulated if a woman wants to visit the grave. Then these stipulations have to be what? Laid down. These foundations have to be what? Established. That she's not emotional, that she's going to fall into polytheism, or she might go to the grave and she'll let her emotions get the best of her. Or she'll start ripping off her clothes or beating her cheeks. Or she'll start slapping her face or start making dua bil-wayli with thubur. Woe to me, or woe, why is this not me? Why couldn't it be me in your place? Why did you have to die? Why couldn't it be me? Oh, Allah, take me. All these different things which are prohibited. Highly prohibited. Because it shows, like we said, displeasure or discontentment for Allah to bring with the others, pre-divine decree. All these matters, like we said, are prohibited. And if one has fear that his wife or what have you from his family, or his mother or sister, what have you, falls into these type of prohibitions, then by all means prohibit her from going to the grave. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So those are the stipulations. So one has to be strong in his aqeedah, or her has to be strong in her aqeedah and her belief. And if one has the absolute security that she will not fall into these prohibitions, then he can let her do so occasionally. As we said, and if we said the hadith, the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, الزوارات القبور يعني على أقل الأحوال اللاتي يكثرن من زيارة القبور. We say that at least that the meaning of the hadith is that what? Those women who visit the graves abundantly, that they fall under the curse. They want to do it on a weekly basis, or twice a day, 3 times a day. All those affairs, like we said, are prohibited. But from time to time, then there's no problem. If all those different types of prohibitions or fears you might have have been lifted. If it's taken away, then one can let his wife or what have you visit the grave for the reasons we just mentioned, to remind herself of the hereafter, and to also make dua for those who died upon the millah of Islam. طيب. So that is in short and brief what we wanted to extract. And we're going to return back now to Kitaab At-Tawheed. So if you look in your books, everyone, as we continue to say, the narrations in this chapter, باب ما جاء في التغليظ في من عبد الله عند قبر رجل صالح, which comes in the severity of the one who worships other than Allah by the grave of a righteous man or righteous individual. طيب. So we were mentioning the narration, which the messenger, or rather we didn't, I don't think we even mentioned it. Or rather we did mention it, I'm sorry. As it comes in the Sahih, we finished that hadith on the authority of our mother, Aisha radiallahu anha abdaha, anna Salama. On the authority of Aisha, anna Salama ذكرت لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كنيسة رأتها بأرض الحبشة وما فيها من الصور فقال أولئك أو أولئك كلاهما صحيح أولئك إذا مات فيهم الرجل الصالح أو العبد الصالح بنوا على قبره مسجدا وصوروا فيه تلك الصور أولئك شرار الخلق عند الله أخرجاه في البخاري مسلم فلا غبار على صحة هذه الرواية. He says, if the Messenger of Allah said, at the time where the first hijrah was made to Habasha, to Abyssinia, it says it was mentioned to the Messenger of Allah, or rather, Salama. Who's Salama, everyone? Ahsant. Who was the wife, also the wife of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. So Aisha and Salama, both the wives of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, both our mothers. And her name was Hind bint Abi Umayyah al-Qurashiyah. As we know that Hind, our mother, Salama, before she was married to the Messenger of Allah, was married to Abu Salama. And she also performed the first migration to Abyssinia, as we discussed. And what she's seen of those images of those righteous people, and which happened likewise to the Christians. Does the Christians likewise fell into the same thing of what happened to the people of the past? So what led them down the road of what, everyone? Of polytheism. She said, and the messenger, she informed the Messenger of Allah what she seen, what she witnessed. So the Messenger of Allah sallallahu he said, أولئك وكلاهما صحيح أولئك إذا مات فيهم الرجل الصالح. He says, they are those that if a righteous man from amongst them died, or a righteous servant or worshiper, they built upon his grave a masjid. And they also made those images of them. They are the evilest of creation with Allah. Tabaraka wa ta'ala. أولئك شرار الخلق. شرار الخلق عند Allah. Did they fall into polytheism? No, they didn't. However, they opened up its what? They opened up the door. So that's the reason why we said, if it's understood from this that they opened up the door, then what would be the magnitude of the sin who actually fell into polytheism? What would be the magnitude of their sin? These people are just merely just what? Merely just opened up the door, and the Messenger of Allah considered them to be the most evil of creation. Then how much so would it be if they actually worship other than Allah, what their sin would be? On a whole nother magnitude. To let us know how disgusting and vilifying and evil this sin of polytheism is. Like we said, there's no sin that has now will come as a result of it, one abiding in hell forever, other than shirk with Allah ta'ala, and disbelief in Him. To let you know how of a tremendous grave sin it is, and how high it is in its magnitude, and how filthy it is, and how ugly it is, and despicable. So that's what we talked about before, and we already explained this hadith. I don't need to explain it again. If you look at your books, listen what to Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, what he mentioned, he said, فَهَؤُلَاءِ جَمَعُوا بَيْنَ الْفِتْنَتَيْنِ فِتْنَةِ الْقُبُورِ وَفِتْنَةِ التَّمَاثِيلِ وَلَهُمَا عَنْهَا قالت فلما نزل برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طفقا يطرح سنقرأه إن شاء الله الآن. So Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, that he mentioned, it said, these people that they gather between two types of what? Trials and tribulations. Two types of fitna. The fitna of what? Of the graves. And the fitna of what? Of images. Then he brings another narration. And we also, alhamdulillah, we have the full statement here. So the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned this narration, and he was talking about who, everyone? The people of the book. The people of the book. From the Jews and the Christians who came before. And we said that they fell into this fitna. So Shaykh al-Islam, what he mentioned here, he said that they gather between two trials or two evils. The fitna of graves. What do you mean the fitna of graves? The fitna of worshiping the righteous either in the graveyards or building a masjid in the graveyard. Right, everyone? There's a third meaning which we're going to discuss, inshallah. There's a third meaning to this. So it's not just one. So we said it's prohibited to build a masjid over the graveyards. Yes, there's a third. Don't worry. We're going to bring it, inshallah. Either to build a masjid over the graveyard. It's prohibited. And it will in what? It will cause the la'na of Allah to descend upon those people. And you'll find that the majority of people who are involved in these type of affairs, you'll find that their affairs are never blessed. And it seems like it's a dark cloud around those people, especially the Sufis and the Rawafid. The people who are involved inside of these type of affairs, is as if it's like a dark cloud around them. And in their places and their masajid, it's like darkness. Like there's no barakah in it. To let you know how evil these type of affairs are. Why? And Allah knows best, because the dissension of Allah is la'na upon these type of people that either build the masajid over the graveyards. They either build the masajid over the graveyards or they pray in the graveyards. And we said that both meanings are correct. It does not mean just or, we said, to build a masjid and instill the what? The grave inside the masjid. So that meaning of taking the masajid, or taking the graves of the Anbiya's masajids we're going to discuss, is comprehensive for all three of these meanings. It's just not what? Building a masjid over the graves, as some people think. That's not the meaning of the hadith. That's one of the meanings. The second one is what, everyone? Or to pray in the what? In the graveyards. Or to pray in the graveyard. And the third is to build a masjid and put a graveyard in it. Or put a burial site or a person dead, to put him inside of the masjid. So it's all three. And there's another meaning. There is another meaning I'm going to talk about, inshallah. طيب. Shaykh al-Islam said, this is the reason. I'm going to read it quickly. وهذه العلة التي لأجلها نهى الشارع عن اتخاذ المساجد على القبور لأنها هي التي أوقعت كثيرا من الأمم إما في الشرك الأكبر أو فيما دونه من الشرك، فإن النفوس قد أشركت بتماثيل الصالحين وتماثيل يزعمون أنها طلاسم الكواكب ونحو ذلك، فإن الشرك بقبر الرجل الذي يعتقد صلاحه أقرب إلى النفوس من الشرك بخشبة أو حجر، ولهذا تجد أهل الشرك يتضرعون عندها ويخشعون ويخضعون ويعبدون بقلوبهم عبادة لا يفعلونها في بيوت الله ولا وقت السحر. to the end of it. You'll find they said Shaykh al-Islam, and this is the rest of his speech. Here they just gave you a portion of it. But here, now we're going to read it in totality here. It says the reasons for why the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, and Allah ta'ala himself prohibited taking the masajid as graves, because it is the reason why a lot of people of the nations of the past fell into major polytheism, or maybe less than that. It says, or maybe that might be a major sin, which is not at the level of major polytheism, maybe something other than that. Meaning, for example, what everyone, what is he saying? Meanings, for example, people now beating themselves at the graves or showing discontentment for the qadr of Allah. Those type of affairs also take place. Or belief in superstitions, belief in omens, belief in bad luck, or belief of some type of myth, or those different types of superstitions that people believe, or what have you. Or believing certain types of beliefs that's pertaining to the shayateen. All those things are reasons of why they fell into it, was because of what took place in the past of them going to the graves and building masajid upon the graves. So this is what Shaykh al-Islam is talking about here. He says it has made a lot of people from the nations of the past either fall into major polytheism or other than that. He said because oneself, you'll find that peoples, how they are, he says you'll find that they set up partners with Allah and falling into polytheism due to those images of the righteous. And the images of what they claim to be, as they say, talasim al-kawakib. He said the righteous people who they claim to so-called be the talismans of the stars. That was the type of superstition they used to believe in. That they were type of talismans of the stars, or anything similar to that. For verily polytheism, with the grave of a man, in which one believes of him being righteous, of course, he says it's more than likely that will be closer, or be a reason. What will cause the people to what? Fall into polytheism more than, let's just say, a piece of wood, or, for example, a rock, or what have you. That is more of a fitna. He said for that reason you'll find that a lot of people shirk, for those who are people of polytheism, they start to show their humbleness, or their humility, or their fear, or their subservience, and they start to worship with their hearts, a worship that you'll find to the degree that they will not do even in the house of Allah, nor during the morning time. He says you'll find in the graves they're doing something what? Doing something and showing more humility and more what? Fear of Allah, more fear and more humbleness they would not even display when they're worshiping Allah in the masjid. You'll find that. Especially, like I said, you'll find this widespread with the Sufis, especially. You'll find that it is very widespread from amongst them. And all the different turuq al-Sufiyya that they are. And like we talked about, there's many turuq al-Sufiyya. As we talked about in the classes previously, we said, for example, you have what type, everyone? You have the Sufi or the Tariqa, number one. You have Shadiliya. You have also Tijaniya. You have also Alawiya. You have also Naqshbandiya. You have also Bralawiya. You have also, you go on and on. Because there's a lot of them. And all of them fell into shirk. Every single last one of them. All of them. Not one has not found the shirk. You have Shadiliya. Shadiliya is more widespread in the area of Morocco. In the area of Morocco and other places. You'll find it Shadili. And the other places such as Tijani is more in places in Africa amongst the, I would say Senegal, like in the west part of Africa. You'll find a lot of them are Tijani. They follow they're Tijaniya. They claim that they follow a Tijani or Ahmed Tijani, which is he is in some very heavy shirk and some other things. They call it Surat al-Fatih or Salat al-Fatih. Salat al-Fatih. Anyway, you have different types of turuqiyya or turuq. You have Shadiliya. You have Tijaniya. What's frequent and what's rapid, and there's a lot of the followers here in America are Qadiriyya. They're Qadiriyya. They claim that they follow Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, or they call Jalani. They say it here. A lot of the Sufis here. You have Qadiriyya, or they call themselves Jilaniya or Qadiriyya. Mubjari call themselves Qadiriyya. But they say that they make dua, you'll find that they actually supplicate to Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. So Qadiriya, Shadiliya, Tijaniya, Alawiya, Naqshbandiya, Baralawiya, and a lot of others. All of them have their nasib of worshiping the dead and worshiping people who are dead. Grave worship. And all of what we said, Ya Ma'ashal Ikhwa, these are the people that fall into this. But at any rate, what Shaykh al-Islam was saying, you'll find that the people of shirk, that they have more humility and more fear and more subservience. And worshiping with their hearts, a worship they won't even do in the house of Allah, to be with Allah, nor during the times of the mornings. And it says that from them who make sujood to them. The majority of them, they hope, يَرْجُونَ مِنْ بَرَكَةِ الصَّلَاةِ عِنْدَهَا وَالدُّعَاءِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. To the point with the dead and who they worshiping, they'll find and try to hope for the barakah or the blessing of the salat by that grave and supplication, which you'll not find they will even do in the masajid. And for that reason, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ closed off the door and shut it and prohibited the salat be in the grave in all circumstances. The salat should be performed in the grave mutlaqan, in all circumstances. For the last thing, you'll find, for example, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ even shut off the different times of when certain salat should be prayed. So not only in the place, but even in zaman. Yes, of course. As you'll find, we know there's a prohibited time when the sun is coming up, where one should not be what? Praying a particular prayer. Why? Because the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said during that time, what everyone? That the people who worship the sun, or the mushrikun, that worship the sun, will start to perform their worship in that particular time. So out of resemblance to them, the Messenger of Allah what? Prohibited that prayer be done at that time. Not to resemble the people of what? Of polytheism. So this is also to show how the Messenger of Allah, how Allah Ta'ala shut off the doors. Not even just the places, but even at certain times when one should not perform prayer out of fear that one will resemble the people of shirk, especially those who used to worship the what? The sun. And the times after, a certain time after Asr. As we know, likewise it's prohibited that one pray a certain, that they pray at a certain time after Asr. Yes, there is. There's a prohibited time. There is a prohibited time of an Asr when the sun is starting to go down, which you'll find likewise is prohibited to pray at that particular time. As far as the sunnah of an Asr, I'll discuss that later. Because I know some people have asked me that. Isn't there a sunnah after Asr? I'll discuss that later. But just to remind everyone, you with me? Just to remind everyone, this is to show how the door of shirk was closed off in every aspect. So now it was just in the places, as we discussed probably in the previous chapter, of talking about slaughtering or sacrificing for other than Allah, that even to the point where the Messenger of Allah prohibited that those places where polytheism used to be performed, that the worship of Allah Ta'ala not be performed in that particular place as far as in regards to that sacrifice that are being performed for Allah, out of fear that one likewise will what? Fall into polytheism. He prohibited that place, and here you'll find in these different types of riwayat and narrations similar to that. Likewise, not to resemble the people who preceded you from the past, from the people of the book. What they used to do, which as a result of it caused the la'na of Allah to descend, is that they used to take their what? The graves of their prophets as masajid. So the Messenger of Allah in so many different narrations prohibited us from resembling the people of the book due to the fact that the curse of Allah descended upon them for different reasons. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah authored a book called Iqtida Sirat al-Mustaqim fi Mukhalafati Ashab al-Jahim. He says the necessitation or the obligation of clinging to the correct straight path by opposing the inhabitants of hell. That's the name of the book. You'll find that he mentioned all the things that the people of the book fell into and how the Messenger of Allah prohibited not to resemble them. From those affairs is this affair here. Not to resemble them in regards to what they did as far as what? Taking the graves of their masajid, the graves of their prophets and their righteous as masajid. And that's from resembling the people of the book from the past, and if you do it, the same thing could descend upon the Muslimin. The la'na of Allah. If you fall into what they did, the Messenger of Allah is saying this here to warn. To say, don't think that you're exempt. This can happen to you. The la'na of Allah can fall into you if you fall into what they fell into. And this is exactly what you see happen with a lot of the Muslims across the world. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. طيب. So we said, Ya ma'ashal ikhwa, if you turn the page, after Shaykh al-Islam mentioned it, said, قالت لما نزل برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طفق يطرح خميصة له على وجهه فإذا اغتم بها كشفها فقال وهو كذلك لعنة الله على اليهود والنصارى اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم مساجد. She also mentioned it, said that when the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم was in his last time in the dunya, he's about to die, alayhi salatu wasalam. As we know, this was all during his last moments of his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, where the Malakul Maut, or the angel of death, descended in order to take the soul of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. It says that طَفِقَ يَطْرَحْ خَمِيصَةً لَهُ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. He said that the Messenger of Allah, when he was complaining from the agonies of death, and the pangs and the agonies of death. Of course, we know he was going in and out. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ was now facing what they call sakaratul maut, at the last part of his life. And he would go in and out until he finally died in Aisha's house, radiallahu anha. So to listen to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, the last things that he was concerned about was the monotheism of his ummah, of them falling into polytheism, out of fear that after he died, they were going to what? Start worshiping his grave. And they was going to start worshiping him. And start taking his qabr or his grave as a what? As a masjid. Either the people praying around it or praying towards it, or building a masjid on top of it, or trying to take his grave and putting it inside a masjid. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ was concerned about the monotheism of his ummah remaining intact. So it would not become affected, or it would become polluted by the pollutants of polytheism. So this was his concern, alayhi salatu wasalam, right before his death. Right at the time he's about to die, you think he was going to discuss something else. He was still focusing on calling to the monotheism and the worship of Allah and the unification of Allah in his worship, and preserving that, and maintaining that to the utmost. So he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, when he took and removed that khamisa, as we know, khamisa is like a garment, it's like a garment that has different types of like lines or stripes or some type of decoration on it. He had this covering his face, and like we said, he was going in and out, and he would remove it when he came back to his conscience, or he came back a little bit for his understanding, know what's going on. He removed it and took it off. So when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ removed it, he said this. He said, وَهُوَ كَذَلِكَ. And this is at the time of his death. He says, may the curse of Allah be upon the Jews and the Christians. Why? What was the reason? They took the graves of their prophets as masajid. So here in this context of death, or the context in which the Messenger of Allah is about to die, he's saying of the reason of why the mercy of Allah was put far away from the Jews and the Christians because of this type of act. We said, some of Ahl Ilm say that the meaning of this statement of the Messenger of Allah is either he was saying that the la'na of Allah descended upon them, meaning that he was just informing that the la'na, the curse of Allah, had descended upon them. Another narration, another meaning that's extracted from this narration is that the Messenger of Allah actually was making dua against them. So it can mean what? Both. But at any rate, whether we say it's the first or the second meaning, we know that it's what? It's still severe. Whether we say that it's Allah's la'na that descended upon them, or what's intended is the Messenger of Allah ﷺ make a dua against them. And in any case, or at any rate, don't worry about that. That's the least of your concerns right now. Your focus on it. Focus. What was I saying again? Oh, so we said whether or not the descension of Allah's la'na upon the Jews and the Christians, or the Messenger of Allah make a dua. We know that in both cases, the affair is severe. Whether we say it's the first one or the second, doesn't matter. Just the mere la'na is something that's tremendous. He said, For the reason of why the Messenger of Allah, whether we say he cursed them or Allah Ta'ala cursing them, what was the reason? They made the qubur, or the graves of their prophets, as masajid. And like we talked about before, the meaning of masajid is just not merely building masajid over the graves. That's just one meaning. If one builds masajid on top of the graves, they have fall under the la'na of Allah Ta'ala, or the curse of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. So that's one meaning. Or like we said, the meaning does not necessarily mean building a masjid on top of the graves. Also, we said the second meaning means what, everyone? Camden? What does it mean? To actually pray a prayer in the graveyard. And tusallu ila al-qubur. As it comes in the narration where the Messenger of Allah said, La tusallu ila al-qubur wa la tajlisu alayha. Do not pray towards the grave and do not sit on it. Do not pray towards the grave and do not sit on it. So if a person prays Salatul al-Fajr, even Nawafil, or any type of prayer it is, doesn't matter. Any type of Salat, whether it be Salatul Fard or Salat al-Nafil, whether supererogatory prayer or obligatory prayer, does not matter. If one prays in the graveyard, then we said this is what the Messenger of Allah prohibited, and what could be a reason of the la'na of Allah descending upon a person. To pray in the graveyard. Pray Salat al-Fajr or Dhuhr or whatever it is. Do not pray it in the graveyard. Go outside the graveyard, pray somewhere else. But do not pray it in the graveyard. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Or Salat al-Nafil. Or it's a voluntary salah, or supererogatory prayer. Do not make any prostration or sujood or anything like that in the graveyard. It is highly prohibited and restricted. So that's the second meaning. The third meaning we said, or to build a masjid and put a grave inside of it. That's also comprehensive for the meaning. As you'll find that a lot of Muslim countries have done this, especially in Egypt. Egypt, you'll find a lot of masajid, they have a grave inside of it. A grave inside of the masjid. And in a lot of other countries has been tested with this. For as a result of it, the la'na of Allah Ta'ala what? Descends. That's the reason why you'll find that a lot of the barakah of those people is gone. Why? Because you're falling into one of the most detested, filthy acts in which the Messenger of Allah prohibited right before his death. And like we said, the Prophet said these people are shirar al-khalq, the most evil creation. So may Allah Ta'ala preserve us and keep us far away from that. So the Messenger of Allah, if you look, everyone, if you look, it says he was warning for what they did. To warn his ummah not to do that. Because the Messenger of Allah knew that he was what? He was going to die. And that this was going to happen after his death. There was going to be a fear of what? Shaitan was going to decorate his place of where he died, alayhi salatu wasalam. Then, as a result of it, they would have took it as a masjid. There's another narration. If you look at your books, everyone, it says, وَلَوْلَا ذَلِكَ أُبْرِزَ قَبْرُهُ. What does that mean? If it wasn't for that, then his grave would have been what? His grave would have been what? Been shown for everyone to see. What does it mean by that? What are they talking about here? لولا هذا يعني الخوف ولولا وجود هذه الخشية لأبرز قبره. What does that mean? If it wasn't for this fear, what the Messenger of Allah was mentioning here, his grave would have been shown for everyone to see. What does it mean? What does that mean, everyone? No. What's the meaning of this hadith? It says that if it wasn't for this, his grave would have been shown. It would have been shown. That's, of course, not the fear part, but his grave would have been shown. What does that mean? Shown where? Not in the masjid. Where? Not a tombstone. It would have been shown for, not raised up. No, not no shrine. No shrine. Not big. Not display. Here, let me sum it up. He would have been buried just like everyone else. That's it. That he would have been put in the Baqi'. He would have been in the grave. Right now, the Messenger of Allah, he's doing all this warning before he dies. Right? Due to the fact that he was trying to make sure to his utmost that his grave would not be taken as a what? As a masjid or a Eid. There's another narration she talks about how he said, also a Eid. Don't take my masjid as a Eid. I'll take my qabr, my grave, as a Eid, excuse me. Tayyib. The Messenger of Allah is saying here, he's warning. Do not take I warn you, do not take the grave of any prophet or what happened to the people of the past, or why the la'nah that fell unto them because of this. He was saying this, right? If this fear was not there, if it wasn't because of this fear, he would have been buried in the graveyard with everyone else. Right now, if the Messenger of Allah was buried in the graveyard with everyone else, what do you think would be happening right now? What do you think would be happening? If the Messenger of Allah was buried in a regular grave site where all the Sahaba were buried, what would be happening right now? There'd be lines of people committing shirk. Being lined up. Here, they're lining up to make dua to the Messenger of Allah. Or make a dua to Allah thinking that the Messenger of Allah is the reason why the dua is accepted to the end of it. This is what he's saying here. This is what the Messenger of Allah is saying here. Is it clear? He says if it wasn't for this fear, then his grave would have basically been put along with everyone else in the Baqi', in the graveyard. Then he would have been regularly buried, just like everyone else. Not no tombstone, not no shrine, not no nothing else. Just saying, basically, he's saying that his grave would have been just there for everyone to see it, just like everyone else was there. That's it. But because of this fear, due to the fact that Shaitan was able to utilize and trick a lot of people, especially in these days, and the more we get away from the Ahd al-Nubuwah, the more that we get far away from the time of prophethood, then the more you see people falling more into what? Misguidance. Especially as times keep going on more and more and more. You see how people are going further and further and further away from the haqq. Tayyib. So now as a result of it, you'll find that the Messenger of Allah, because of this fear, you'll find that if he was buried just like everyone else, there'd be lines and lines and lines of people what? Lining up to what? To fall into polytheism and commit some type of act that the Messenger of Allah highly prohibited. Rather, that act that they were performing is destroyed the whole mission of why he came as a prophet and messenger. Because the first thing that the Messenger of Allah came to make war with was shirk. Not only was this his mission, it was the mission of all the prophets together to make war with shirk and establish monotheism. That was the mission of all the prophets. So you in that one act have destroyed the whole mission of why the Messenger of Allah came what? As a prophet and messenger in the first place. You destroyed the whole foundation of why he came as a prophet and messenger. Wiped it out. So everything else after that of evil and filthiness is easy once you fall into what? Polytheism. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So this is the meaning of the hadith here. I even read quickly what the great Imam, Shaykh Uthaymeen, he mentioned this regard. Listen to what he said, everyone. He says, وَلَوْلَا ذَلِكَ لَا أُبْرِزَ أو أُبْرِزَ قَبْرُهُ أي أخرج من بيته لأن البروز معناه الظهور أي لولا التحذير وخوف أن يتخذ قبره مسجدا لأخرج ودفن في البقيع مثلا لكنه في بيته أصون له وأبعد عن اتخاذه مسجدا ولهذا لم يبرز قبره وهذا أحد الأسباب التي أوجبت أن لا يبرز مكان قبره ومن أسباب ذلك إخباره أنه ما قبض نبي إلا دفن حيث قبض ولا مانع أن يكون للحكم الواحد سببان فأكثر. To the end of it, what he said, rahimahullah. So he's saying here that the meaning, if you look at your books, everyone, where it says that his grave would have been shown. If you look into it, the hadith, not there, look at the hadith. It says, if it wasn't for that, then his grave would have been what? Shown. It would have been manifest. Other than he had fear that his qabr or his grave would be taken as a masjid. Tayyib. So this is what Shaykh Uthaymeen said in this regard. He said exactly what we was mentioning here. He said, if it wasn't for this warning and the fear that his grave would be taken as a masjid, then it would have been removed out of where? Out of the house of Aisha. Not in the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ is buried in the house of Aisha, even to this mere moment right now. Where is he buried? Do we say in the masjid or in the house of where? Aisha. Which one, everyone? In the house of Aisha. Keep that in mind. That's very important that you learn that and you keep it memorized. First of all, the Messenger of Allah is not buried in the masjid. He's buried in the house of Aisha. Is it clear? Is it clear? Caden? Even though he's not, trust me, I know with children. Children, even though they have sleep, his mind is memorizing this. Trust me. Kids at these ages, their minds are like sponges. Even though they might be half asleep, they'll remember later on when they're energetic. Especially with my big mouth, you definitely going to remember. Tayyib. So we say that if that was the case, if this fear wasn't there, the Messenger of Allah said, what? That the grave would have been removed from the house of Aisha, would have been put inside the Baqi', in the grave site. But due to this fear, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had predetermined that the Messenger of Allah die in the house of Aisha, with all the different hujrah that was surrounding it, to protect the Messenger of Allah from being utilized as a deity or be taken as an object of worship or being deitized. So that's the reason why the Messenger of Allah, you'll find of the hikmah, Allah predetermined and destined that the Messenger of Allah die in the house of Aisha. Listen to what the great Imam says. He says, however, the Messenger of Allah being buried in the house of Aisha is more maintained or more of a protection for him. Aswanu lahu. It's more of a maintenance and a protection for him. And it's further, and putting the people further from taking him or his grave as a masjid. And for that reason, he was not buried where everyone else was buried. He was buried in a manner that was to try to safeguard and protect, where he died in the house of Aisha. So what? So the surroundings and no one can what? Try to come in and try to utilize his grave. So it says, these are the reasons why the Messenger of Allah was obligatory to what? Of why? His grave was not going to be buried in a manner of how everyone else was. And this was from the reasons why the Messenger of Allah also mentioned that he said, if a prophet dies, he is buried whereas he what? Or the place where he died. Or the place where he died. So the Messenger of Allah had fear that the people would do this, or try to take his grave as a masjid. And also likewise, the Sahaba, both are correct. Whether we say khashiya and yutakhadha qabruhu masjida, or khushiya and yutakhadha qabruhu masjida. They say he feared, there's one narration, or it was feared that his grave would be taken as a masjid. Both of them are correct. So you can say khashiya or khushiya. Both of them are what? Both of them are correct. So that is the reason why the Messenger of Allah was buried in this manner. The Sahaba had gathered together and they made mutual consultation in this regard, because they knew the importance of this matter and the great magnitude of what would happen if the people fell into what he prohibited. So some of the Sahaba had said and made the ishara that he remained in the house of Aisha after they also mentioned that hadith that we just said. And also likewise they put different types of something around it. This is before it wasn't made in the masjid. Because we know that the hujrah of Aisha was outside the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. It wasn't inside initially. As we said, right everyone? When the Messenger of Allah died, was the house of Aisha in the masjid? No, it wasn't. It was outside the masjid. It was outside the masjid. So they had put different types. They shut it off. And they put different types of protective measures to let the people not what? Go to that house to try to do something in order to fall to shirk. They put every type of precautionary measure for them not to what? Well, it's the first warning, huh? That's the first one of the first bell. Anyway. طيب. This hadith is to show of what happened to those who are the righteous. And we know that the head of the righteous is what, everyone? The head of all the righteous is the prophets and messengers. And the head of all the prophets and messengers, who's heading all the messengers and the prophets, who is the messenger of Allah. As we know, the messenger of Allah is the greatest of all prophets and messengers. He's the greatest of all of them. Muhammad ibn Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam. He's the greatest of all of them, and despite of that, he still is only abd, even though he's the greatest of all prophets and messengers. As we're going to talk about, inshallah, in the next narration that's going to come. As I'm going to describe where he says, أَنَا أَبْرَأُ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَن يَكُونَ لِي مِنْكُمْ خَلِيلٌ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدِ اتَّخَذَنِي خَلِيلًا كَمَا اتَّخَذَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا وَلَوْ كُنْتُ مُتَّخِذًا مِنْ أُمَّتِي خَلِيلًا لَاتَّخَذْتُ أَبَا بَكْرَ خَلِيلًا أَلَا وَإِنَّ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ كانوا يتخذون قبور أنبيائهم مساجد ألا فلا تتخذوا القبور مساجد فإني أنهاكم عن ذلك. The message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know some of the prophets were Kalim Allah. Allah spoke to them. Some of them were Khalilullah. Ibrahim was Khalilullah. Then you'll find some of what is widespread amongst the tongues of the common folk, or the Muslims, they'll say the message of Allah is Habibullah. Is that right? Wrong. Khata. The message of Allah ﷺ is all three. The message of Allah was Habibullah. He was Khalil ar-Rahman, Khalilullah, and he was Kalimullah. Message of Allah gathered between all the characteristics of the prophets. Because the message of Allah was Kalimullah. The message of Allah was Khalilullah. And the message of Allah was Habibullah. All three. And others. Not just those three, and others. Alayhi salatu wasalam. Why? Because Allah spoke to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that made him Kalim Allah. And this hadith right here says he's clearly what? That Allah took me as a what? Khalil. So it's not only Ibrahim is Khalil Allah, who is also Khalil Allah, everyone? Muhammad ibn Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam. So whoever said that Ibrahim is Khalil Allah and the message of Allah is Habib Allah, هذا كلام غير محرر ما هو صحيح. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كليم الله خليل الله حبيبه صلى الله عليه وسلم. He's the Kalim of Allah. Just as Musa was Kalim Allah, the message of Allah is Kalim Allah. Yes. And just as Ibrahim was Khalil Allah, Muhammad ibn Abdullah was also Khalil Allah. And also all the prophets in the message and the Salihin are Habib Allah or Ahbab Lillahi Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, of course. And those who are righteous. But the message of Allah likewise is also what? Habibullah. All of them. All these characteristics, the message of Allah gathered between every single last one of them. The message of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to him in a manner in which he did not speak to Musa. Which lets you know he was on a higher level, alayhi salatu wasalam. Rather, he received a miracle that was even more in depth, more than the miracle of Musa. Musa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to him directly. The message of Allah went up to the seventh heavens, but Allah directly spoke to him. That's even more on a higher level. That's on a higher level. The message of Allah went up to the seventh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took him up to the seventh heavens, spoke to him directly. Musa was what? He was here in the dunya. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise him to the seventh heaven? La. That's what you'll find that Ibn Kathir mentioned Bidayah wa Nihaya. That he mentioned and said that there was not a prophet from the prophets except that the message of Allah was given every single miracle that every prophet was given, either something similar to it or better. That's what Ibn Kathir has a whole chapter in the Bidayah wa Nihaya. That there's not a prophet from the prophets except that the message of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam was given something similar to it or better. Wrote a whole chapter on it. Go back to it. It'll blow your mind. It's tremendous. To let you know the high level of Muhammad bin Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam. So you can increase your levels for respecting the message of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. And respecting his sunnah. And knowing his high status. And knowing how high of a status he is with Allah ta'ala, even though he's still only a human being. He doesn't deserve to be worshipped. But he's still considered the best of all messengers and prophets. And he'll be the head of them on the day of resurrection. To show you his high level, alayhi salatu wasalam. Like we said, Kalim Allah was Musa. The Prophet ﷺ was also Kalim Allah. Allah spoke to him directly and made the salawat obligatory upon him when he rose up to the seventh heaven, and Allah spoke directly to him and heard the voice of Allah Ta'ala. So that makes him Kalim Allah. Likewise, this hadith clearly shows what, everyone? He's also Khalil Allah. And I think Habib Allah that's easy. The message of Allah is loved by Allah Ta'ala likewise. That's simple. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Tayyib. All the miracles of the prophets, the message of Allah is given something similar to it or better. Trust me, if you look into all the narrations of the message of Allah, gathering all the ayat that was given to the message of Allah that happened at his hands, it was something better. As we said, you'll find that they say, well, what about Jesus, the son of Mary? He used to bring the death, right? He used to bring the life back to the life back to the dead. The message of Allah was given something better. He's given something better than that. The message of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, things used to talk that had no life in it. Rocks, trees, everything. Food used to talk. Food, rocks, trees were talking. Things that you would think had no life in it were talking. That's even more depth. That's even stronger. You understand what I'm saying, everyone? There is also narrations that Ibn Kathir mentioned where there was also something that happened when someone was brought back to life. I'll bring that later. I'll bring that one later. Oh, also likewise with Musa, same thing. Musa, Allah spoke directly to him. The message of Allah also, Allah spoke directly to Musa. Allah Ta'ala spoke directly to Musa. Allah Ta'ala also spoke directly to what? The message of Allah. However, his was on a higher level, where he went up to the seventh heaven and talked directly to Allah. Type. What about the magic of Musa, the magicians, what they did during his time, the magicians, in which, as we know, Allah Ta'ala allowed Musa to do, throw down his staff. And if you look to look what happened with Musa and the staff, and what Allah utilized in order to destroy their batil, destroy the false of the magicians, it was tremendous. To the point, like we know, where even the magician fell to prostration. They even fell to prostration what they saw, blew their minds. That couldn't have been magic. That's something that was totally against the minds of the people, right? Message of Allah was given something better than that. What was he given? The moon split in half. That's on a whole nother level, whole nother degree. The moon split in half. Moon split in half. That's greater than what Musa was given. Greater. Moon split in two. The message of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam during this time. They thought he did magic on them, and we said it happened. Why did it happen? Because they asked the travelers. They even said they saw it. People who came from a remote distant place and said, we saw this moon split into two. We saw it. And even Ibn Kathir mentioned his Bidayah wa Nihaya. He says, of course, from the Mushrikeen and other lands, they have like some ritual practice. Of course, we know it's shirk. But the point of the matter, why we mention this, it said, we do this on the night where we all saw the moon split into two. So people in other countries saw it. And other remote distant lands saw it. Where they recorded this. So it's something that truly what? Happened. It's on a higher level than Musa, isn't it? Whole nother level. The moon split in half. A star split in half. That's why Ibn Kathir put in his Bidayah wa Nihaya. He said there's not a prophet from the prophets except that the message of Allah was given something similar to it or better. He was the greatest prophet and messenger of humanity. Alayhi salatu wasalam. You understand, everyone? Gee, stop here. Yeah, hit around the bell. Others, scientifically, there's a split in it. They said scientists said that there was a split. There's a long split. Wow. What happened? Even during the time of, I give you so many examples we could give. We could go on and on. Even everything that every prophet was given, the message of Allah was given it. Of the miracles of what they did, or something similar or better. Another reason, for example, during Yusha ibn Nun. As we know, Allah allowed time to stop during for Prophet Yusha. During the time of one of the battles of, who was it, Badr? I forgot which battle, I have to check it. Time stopped. Allah made the sun stop in the middle of the battle. It's time for a promoted time, the time stopped, halted. Stopped during the time of the message of Allah. Yes, the time stopped. Time stopped. That's greater Yusha. Or something similar to what Yusha was given. And while they was in battle, the time stopped during the time of the message of Allah. It's a lot of things that happen. A lot. We go all day, all night. Even doing the barakah. You'll find that even Kathir said up due to the barakah of following the sunnah of the Prophet, things were happening that was considered not normal to what people are acclimated to seeing on a daily basis. Not only during his life, but even after his death, and while he was living, things were taking place outside amongst the Sahaba while he was living. Of things that people saw. For example, where the animals, because it's a narration talked about how an animal was talking. An animal was speaking. One of the Sahaba told him there's a prophet. There's a prophet and a messenger that you need to go and see. And on top of that, the message of Allah informed on the last days of this earth, it was a wolf. The wolf was speaking. The wolf was speaking. And also likewise, a person would say, what about Sulaiman? As we know, Sulaiman was given the miracle of understanding the language of insects and animals. Message of Allah had the same thing. We know that the message of Allah was given something similar or better. The message of Allah one time went to an animal that was being abused, and he put his ear to the mouth of it. Took his ear to the mouth of it, and it was like speaking in his ear. And the message of Allah told the one who was watching the animal, he said, you're doing this and this and this and this to this animal. You're mistreating it. And the man looked at it and was in shock, saying, that's exactly what I do. The message of Allah heard the what and understood the language of what the animal was saying. I don't think it was a dog. It was either a horse or something like that. I got to check it. I think it was a horse. And he told the person who was the owner of the animal that you're mistreating the animal. You're mistreating him, or what have you. At any rate, everything, it's a long chapter, but that's just the summary. But even after his death, rather while he was alive, things were happening. Things happened with the Sahaba when they were in dark and their stick would light up automatically. One narration said their stick would light up and they had nothing to light it up with. Like the stick, I mean, it wasn't a torch. It lit up by itself. Some of them say it was a finger that lighted up one of the Sahaba who were in the dark. They wanted to return back to something, and it was in extreme darkness. And either their stick had lit up by itself, or in one narration I think it said his finger lit up in the dark. This was during his time. And after that, during the time of the Sahaba after his death, as we know some of the narrations, where they said that the battles when they were crossing over the water and they was walking on top of it in order to go to jihad. He was walking on top of the water. It's a lot of narration. They said that was only due to the barakah of the sunnah of the Prophet that they could do that. That if it wasn't for the barakah of Allah, then the barakah of the sunnah following the message of Allah, that wouldn't have happened. There's a lot of narration. We'll talk about that later, inshallah. Any questions about the lesson? That's what I was going to talk about today. That's exactly what I was going to start talking about. It still is in his house. It's still in the house of Aisha. His grave is not on display at all. It's been locked. It's been gated. And they even put certain barriers around it. So it could be totally blocked off. I'll read this quickly because I don't even know why I stopped here. Listen to this. طيب. إذا قال قائل نحن الآن واقعون في مشكلة بالنسبة لقبر الرسول فإنه في وسط المسجد فما الجواب؟ قلنا الجواب على ذلك من وجوه. So let's talk about the grave in the masjid right now is in the masjid. He says it's in the middle of the masjid. He said, what's the answer? The answer is this. Shaykh Uthaymeen, he says this. Number one. He said, firstly, أن المسجد لم يبنى على القبر بل بني المسجد في حياة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Firstly, number one, that the masjid was not built upon a grave. It was separate during the time of the Messenger of Allah. Aisha's house was outside. The masjid was separate. That's number one. Number two, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يدفن في المسجد حتى يقال إن هذا من دفن الصالحين في المسجد بل دفن في بيته. So number two, the Messenger of Allah was not buried in the masjid. He wasn't. Until a person could say, rather, this is from burying the righteous inside the masjid, then one could say. He said, rather, the Messenger of Allah was buried in his house, in the house of Aisha. Isn't that right? He was buried initially where? In the house. In the house. Number three, entering the houses of أن إدخال بيوت الرسول ومنها بيت عائشة مع المسجد ليس باتفاق من الصحابة بل بعد انقرض أكثرهم ولم يبق منهم إلا القليل وذلك عام 94 تقريبا فليس مما أجازه الصحابة أو أجمعوا عليه. This is a third thing. That the message of Allah, he says, إدخال بيوت الرسول, or that the message of Allah, that the house of Aisha was entered inside the masjid. So we don't say the grave of the Messenger of Allah was entered in the masjid. We say that the house, or that the masjid was built to the point where the house was now put inside the masjid, the house. What was inside the house is the what? Is the grave. So it's not the grave, it's the house of Aisha, right? Fine. So from it is the house of Aisha with the masjid. Even that was an agreement. That's the last thing one was finished. That was an agreement of the Sahaba. They didn't agree on that. Rather, after the majority of them had what? Or after the majority of them had died off, there was not a little bit of them except a few. And that was during the year 94 after the Hijrah, approximately. Except there's some of the Sahaba that said, no, don't do it. Don't build the masjid so big to the point where the house of Aisha would be what? Put inside the masjid. And it wasn't actually put inside. It was still there. They just built the masjid so big to the point, out of force, the house had what? That the house just happened to be in the masjid. You understand? But the house of Aisha wasn't moved. The house just, the Prophet ﷺ masjid expanded. They built it bigger and bigger to accommodate a lot of what? People. Because it was becoming bigger. And Islam was spreading. There was a lot of Muslims. So they made it bigger to the point when it started expanding, just the house had just fell inside the masjid based upon the fact that that masjid had just expanded. Not because of the masjid or the house was moved and the house was put inside the masjid. That wasn't it. It's just they built it and they built the masjid around the house to make it bigger. But at any rate, that particular act, the Sahaba weren't in agreement with. A lot of them weren't in agreement with that. So that wasn't ittifaq or ijma'. Some of them did not what? Not agree to that particular act, as some of them say. Especially from the Tabi'een with Sa'id ibn Musayyib. So he said he was not pleased with that, out of fear that the people would still try to what? Do something evil. The final thing is that we say, he said, أَنَا الْقَبْرَ لَيْسَ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ. He says, still we say that the grave is not in the masjid. حتى بعد إدخاله ينه في حجرة عائشة مستقلة عن المسجد فليس المسجد مبنيا عليه ولهذا جعل هذا المكان محفوظا بثلاثة جدران وجعل الجدار في زاوية منحرفة عن القبلة أي يعني مثلث والركن في الزاوية الشمالية بحيث لا يستقبله الإنسان إذا صلى لأنه منحرف. This is the last part he says. This is a good answer. He said that the grave is not in the masjid. Even after the house happened to just come inside the masjid because they expanded it. He says, rather it's in the hujrah of the Aisha, which is separate from the masjid. Still, the house is separate from the masjid. They built the masjid around the house of Aisha. Built it around it. So the house had to just happen to be inside of it. Not because they moved it, like we said. But the grave is still in the hujrah of Aisha, which is separate from the masjid. And the masjid is not built upon the what? It's not built upon the house of Aisha. It's not built upon the house of Aisha. It's not. And for that reason, you'll find that it was made protective barriers around it. If a person wants to make an umrah, you'll see it. You say it was put protective barriers around it, and they also protected it with what, or fortified it with what? 3 walls. You put 3 walls around it to block it and close it all off. You'll find that. And they made in the wall a type of what? A corner. To try to now get the people to turn away from praying towards the grave so they can face the what? The Qibla. So they can face the Qibla. And he's just explaining how it was actually set up as far as the pillars and the protective barriers fortified around it. He said where it was made, whereas no one can face it if one was to pray because it's away from the Qibla. It's away. It was put away from that. But for that reason, we could say that this problem has been what? Has been removed from those who are worshippers of the grave, try to use this as a shubha. They use this as an ambiguity to say, see, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his grave is not in there. His grave is not in there. First of all, like we said, based upon the fact initially that the masjid was not built upon a grave at all. It was separate. The Prophet's masjid was here. And the house of Aisha was what? Outside, separate. Just when the masjid was built and expanded to the point where, like we said, that the house fell inside of it due to the expansion and the huge vastness of the masjid. So it's not because of what? Because they actually intended that his grave be inside the masjid. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? That answers your question? That's what I was going to talk about next class, but we'll stop here, inshallah. Any other questions about the class? This is the last class for till next week, everyone, because I'm leaving. I'm going to be gone for about a week and a half, inshallah. About a week and 2-3 days. Tafadal.